Hello and welcome to a special episode of the Stash Down Diaries. If you're new here, my name is Jen and this is my YouTube channel where I talk all about my knitting projects and plans with a focus on using up my stash. So normally on the weekend I would record a video where I would talk about things I've been working on in the past week, my works in progress, my finished objects, any acquisitions, although they're few and far between, and some things I'm planning on knitting or any new patterns that have come up that intrigue me. But March is almost over and it so happens to be my knitiversary month. I don't remember the exact date that I started knitting, but anyway, I thought it'd be fun to do a little retrospective and talk about why I learned how to knit and some of the projects that I was knitting early on as I was learning how to knit. And so I think that if you are a beginner knitter, you will get a lot out of this video by seeing some of the early beginner projects that I've knit, and I will be linking to a Ravelry bundle. So instead of linking every single project in the description, I have made a Ravelry bundle and I will put a link to that so that you can just see the bundle of all the patterns I'm going to talk about. But if you're an intermediate knitter, you'd probably enjoy seeing all the different patterns and yarns that I've used. And if you're anything like me, I really enjoy a good mindless pattern every once in a while, and I do have some favorites here. So I'm just going to get into it. So why did I learn how to knit? Well, basically, I wanted a pair of fingerless gloves and I couldn't find any around here. I live in Cape Breton, which is in the province of Nova Scotia in Atlantic Canada, and we don't have a huge population. I think the entire population of the island is about 100,000 or so. If I'm drastically wrong, I'll put the actual number down here. But yeah, so sometimes, especially 12 years ago, it was kind of difficult to find fingerless mitts anywhere, and I still don't really see them in stores. And I went on Etsy and I was looking at them and I was looking at the prices and I was just like, I understand definitely why the prices would be like high and stuff, but then a lot of them were also overseas and I'd have to pay like a lot for shipping. So I thought, why don't I just learn how to knit? And it'd be great if I could learn how to knit and then just make myself a pair. The only pair, I still have them, the only pair that I found locally, I found at Winners one day. And these are them. I haven't worn them in years. But they're pretty, aren't they? So these are the commercially made ones that I found at Winners. This is the only pair of fingerless mitts that I found anywhere in Cape Breton. And yeah, I wore them for a bit, but I was kind of looking for the opportunity to learn how to knit fingerless gloves so that I could make my own the way I wanted. And eventually, the opportunity did come up. I have a biology degree, and one of my biology professors, this was like, I don't know how many years after I was in, so 6, I guess. Yeah, so I graduated in 2006. And then in 2012 was when one of my university professors was offering a beginning knitter session. So I went to her place. I paid a fee because she was supplying yarn and needles. And I will show you. These are my first knitting needles that she supplied to me. These are just the metal ones from Michaels, and they are a 5mm needle. And she asked me like what colors I liked, and of course like blue. And blue greens are my favorite color, mostly blue though. But so she supplied me with these needles, and this is not the same ball of yarn, the exact same one, because it has been knitted, but this is the same yarn that she supplied to me. It is Loops and Threads Charisma in the, is it Sunny Day? Let me have a look. Yeah, Sunny Day. I don't think this colorway is available anymore because I've been knitting a, like kind of a memory blanket out of this to kind of commemorate my first yarn. And I don't think I'd like the last time I looked for this colorway wasn't there. So I'm making do with the number of balls of yarn that I have, because what I'd do, I would go into Michaels and I would use that 40% off coupon to buy a ball of yarn every once in a while. Yeah, so this is the yarn that she supplied me with. And what she did was she taught me how to cast on, cast off, knit, and purl, and then she kind of directed me to Ravelry to pick out patterns. She showed me Ravelry, she showed me how to use the filters, and of course I use that difficulty rating, like, you know, obviously, because I would do the difficulty level easy and free patterns, and I would search that way and find patterns to practice with. But when I got this yarn, the first thing I did to practice knitting and purling, I just knit a scarf. And I was doing knit stitches, I remember. Every once in a while I would accidentally purl a row or something, so then the stitches would switch and the garter bumps would be on. So I was trying to do stockinette stitch, so the garter bumps would end up all on one side and there'd be stockinette on the other. And the other thing I didn't know at the time was that when you knit stockinette stitch like in a line as a scarf, it curls. So the scarf was curling. And anyway, my professor said that it looked like a Punky Brewster scarf, but it was good practice. And it had been frogged, of course. And now I know that if you're going to knit a stockinette scarf, you have to put a little bit of garter on either end of the scarf to prevent the curling. So anyway, now this yarn, after the fact, after I'd frogged the scarf, I had used it for a marble bag for my nephew. So I will put a picture of that here. And so that has long since been knit up, and I have a batch of new skeins. So anyway, that is how I learned how to knit and why. And I haven't looked back since. Like Ravelry, I am just going to tell you, even just browsing that database was just, it hooked me on knitting. And the thing about me is that I found that I was never good at crafts. Like no matter what craft I tried, I was just terrible at it. Scrapbooking and like making shadow boxes. I was just terrible at it. But knitting, it just like came to me for some reason. And I just enjoyed the hunt for combining patterns and yarn. So yeah, I kept up with it. And so she taught me how to knit and purl. And then whenever I came across another stitch that I needed to know, I used, I had two resources. I would either use YouTube, or I found that the Stitch and Bitch books were really, really helpful with that. Because I'm, you know, I'm a Zennial. I was kind of raised in both analog and digital time, so I still really like to hold books and look at books. So I use both of those resources. And yeah, so the Stitch and Bitch books, I got the first one, the easier one first, and used that as a reference, and then I got the second one as I started to progress with my stitches a little bit. So they were super helpful. But anyway, that is how I started to get going. So that was in March that I learned to knit, and it wasn't long, only a few months later in July, that one of my co-workers told me about a little yarn shop in Bedeck here, where I live right now. I wasn't living here at the time, but anyway, and I thought it was like kind of funny that there'd be a yarn shop in the tiny community of Bedeck. But I took a drive up one weekend, and lo and behold, the most beautiful yarn shop that I've ever seen was here. And it was my first kind of introduction into like better tools and just beautiful yarns, all like natural fibers. The shop owner, Pat, had curated a really, really nice selection of yarns, ranging in price. And, you know, there were some acrylics for baby knitting. It was mostly natural fibers, though. There were some blends, natural and acrylic. It was just like, it was a wonderful shop. Like, I couldn't have asked for a better way to start, but it was also my introduction to how much knitting actually really costs. And I think a lot of people who don't knit think that people knit because it's cheaper. It's not. It is not. I could buy a sweater or something like this, I would guess, for probably half of what I actually paid for the yarn. But, you know, we do this thing because we want the customization. We want something unique that nobody else has. We want to choose what fibers we want our clothing to be made out of, you know, that kind of thing. And it's just a wonderful process to go through, from selecting your pattern to selecting your yarn to sitting down and knitting the project, and that rush when you get that last stitch cast off. So anyway, it's worth it. But yeah, when I first got there, it was like a little bit of sticker shock, I'm not gonna lie. And one of the first yarns that I chose to knit with was this Sirdar Indie yarn. I think I still have one ball of it floating around here somewhere, and I should knit with it soon. But that was the first pair of fingerless mitts that I knit. There was a leaflet in the shop, and it had like a hat, and I think it had leg warmers, and it had fingerless mitts. And the mitts were just a pattern. I will have them, they are in my Ravelry page. I didn't put it in the bundle because you can't, I don't think you can get the pattern anymore, and only my project and the first project, Knit With Them, I guess the sample project, are the only two projects under that pattern. So I don't know where you would find it. So I did not link that one, but if you want to see it, well, here's a picture. And basically you knit it flat and then seam it up the side, leaving a little hole for the thumb. So that was my first pair of fingerless mitts that I knit for myself. And of course, like with the fingerless mitts being the thing that I wanted to knit the most, that was pretty satisfying, although I was still like wanting to do, you know, something a little more similar to the ones that I had. So anyway, I just kept working at it and knitting until I felt like I was good enough to knit, you know, thumb gussets and stuff. So anyway, so it did eventually happen that I did knit myself a pair of fingerless mitts with thumb gussets. I think they're still around somewhere, but I am not sure. Like, I could not find them. So I looked around my house, I looked around my parents' house because that's where I was living at the time, but I have not seen them. So anyway, it was yarn, Noro, I think it was Noro Curion that I purchased at Bedeck Yarns. And I don't know, looking back, it probably wouldn't be the pattern that I would have picked. I picked Campside fingerless mitts, and the only reason that I probably wouldn't have picked them again, because as a beginner, you knit in two different directions. So the top was knit in one way and the rest of the mitt was knit in another way. Like, so garter stitch going around, and then I think you picked up and knit the mitt, or I can't remember, but that had to be attached somehow. And looking back, there were a lot more beginner friendly patterns that I could have picked instead of that one, but they're cute. Here's a picture. I don't have them, but you know what? Luckily, because my professor introduced me to Ravelry right off the bat, everything, all that information is still on Ravelry from my first projects, things that I've frogged, like all of that stuff is still on there. So I had a really easy time figuring out what I knit and when. So anyway, that was the second pair of fingerless mitts that I knit, but I was still working on projects that helped me learn how to knit. So I will introduce you to some of my first projects other than, you know, the fingerless mitts. Here is my first shawl. And the pattern for this, like, it wasn't much of a pattern. It was a little square piece of paper that that the yarn shop owner gave with the yarn. And this is 2 skeins of, I can't remember if it's Fleece Artist or Handmaiden. I think it's Fleece Artist, but it was called Curly Locks, and it's just a triangle shawl. So you cast on 3 stitches, and then you yarn over it on every row until until the yarn was like used up. And it was 2 skeins of the Curly Locks. And this colorway, like, especially being one of my first projects, this colorway, you will see it in my projects as we go on. I think there's at least one other project, but like, if you watch my videos, you have seen this colorway before. This is the Cape Breton Highlands colorway. It is my favorite colorway of the Fleece Artist Handmaiden ones. It is one that was specially dyed for Bedeck Yarns and is now specially dyed for Tracy's Rolling Yarn Shop. So I'm so glad that even though Bedeck Yarns has since closed, this colorway lives on and is still available. So anyway, this was my first shawl, and I keep this actually at my office at work, and I keep it slung over the back of my desk chair. And sometimes I throw it over the, throw it over my shoulders if it's a little bit chilly in the office in the winter. But it's also just like this nice homey thing that, like, I don't know, makes me think of home, just makes my office more homey when I'm there. So this is, yeah, one of my very first projects. And of course, like, this is just practicing knit stitches, but I mean with this curly yarn. I think this yarn is discontinued technically, but I think there's a different version of it that they sell. So yeah, knitting with the curly yarn is interesting, and I really like how, I don't want to say that it felt it, it just kind of, in a way, felt it, I guess, but it's like more, the fibers are like kind of rubbed a little closer together. But I do enjoy that because it was kind of holy before. So anyway, that is the curly locks. And then I wanted at the time to really practice knitting and purling. And although nowadays seed stitch is not my favorite, I did use seed stitch in a project to practice my knitting and purling. And that project is the Gaptastic cowl. So here it is. This is the first one that I knit, and I knit this out of, I think it's Woolies Thick and Quick, Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick. And you can see, like, it's, like, there's mistakes. I don't know what happened here. It's a little bit holy. I don't know what went wrong there. And I did make a lot of mistakes. Like, I'd be forgetting, like, actually, this was not the first iteration of this cowl. I cast it on and I was working on it, and I ended up doing a ribbing because I made the mistake. But anyway, that is what you do when you're a beginner knitter. And so this is the first one that I knit. I didn't wear it all that much. I have a cute picture of my old dog Jasper wearing this. He would model my projects from time to time. But and it's in my Ravelry page, so it's nice to look back at that stuff. But the one that, my official Gaptastic cowl, eventually I got myself some Malabrigo Chunky. I think this colorway is in Pearl, maybe. And here it is. And this was later on when I was knitting, so there's like, it's pretty good. There's no mistakes. And this is a great cowl, whether you are a beginner knitter and you want to knit something simple to practice knitting and purling, or if you are an intermediate knitter and you just want snuggle city. And like back then, these big chunky cowls were all the rage. And you know, like, I don't care about trends. I wear what's practical for me and what makes me comfortable. But just saying, at the time, this was a really popular pattern, and I'm pretty sure that if you do a Ravelry search and do most popular or most projects or something like that, it'll be like in the first 20. But anyway, you'll find it in my bundle. So that was another one that I used to practice knitting and purling. So this project that I'm going to talk about now is my, like, probably one of my all-time favorites that I've worked on. I still wear it a lot in the wintertime. And it was another one where I was practicing knitting and purling, and that is the Noro striped scarf. And I remember looking at the Noro yarns at Bedeck Yarns and thinking, I'm going to need 4 balls of this yarn to make this scarf. And the yarn is $12 per ball. So it's going to be a $48 scarf. And I thought that was so expensive at the time. Me now, I'm like, you know, I'm still not going for the caveat and stuff, but like, it's just how much yarn costs. So anyway, I've gotten used to it. I've adapted. If you want, you know, the yarn that you want, sometimes you got to pay for it. But this doesn't seem as expensive to me now. But I remember the sticker shock. But anyway, yeah, I love this scarf so much. So it was just, worth every penny and worth all the time knitting it. And I remember at the time I was still living outside of Sydney. I was still living with my parents, and I was a seasonal worker, and I got an opportunity to act in place of a full-time position for a few weeks, but that was like in the Waikagama office. And that's an hour and a half about from my parents' house. So I was staying in a house that was in Margaree that like my department like has. And yeah, the manager let me stay there so my drive would be a lot shorter. And I was there, kind of bored out of my mind because there's no cell service there or anything like that. So I was just watching TV and working on this. So this is a nice memory from that time. And yeah, it's one that I still absolutely love to this day and use quite a bit. So now at this point, I've practiced my knitting and purling, and I was starting to get into just a little dabbling into lace knitting. And there was a new shop in Sydney called Luck and Booth Yarns. And unfortunately, it didn't stay open for very long. The shop owner had a child who had medical issues, and they just didn't feel like they had time to run a business. So the shop did eventually close. While it was there, I was so happy because it introduced me to more different yarn brands, and some that I still love and enjoy today, like Cascade yarns and stuff. So anyway, I started dabbling in lace white yarn, and the yarn shop owner there introduced me to like this diamond lace pattern that I knit into a scarf, and I don't have it here. I think I gave it to my mom. I'm pretty sure, but here's a picture of that one. And I was also just kind of practicing on just an eyelet scarf, and then that one was the dewdrop cowl. And I don't have those here either because my mom has one and I think my sister has one. But here's a picture of one of them in progress, and that was with handmaiden yarn. I think my mother has that one, or does my sister? I don't know. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. I'm thinking out loud as I usually do. If you watch my videos, sometimes I do that while I'm speaking here. So that was when I started dabbling into lace weight knitting. Lace weight knitting? No, lace knitting. Okay, so just to recap, I started knitting in 2012 in March. And then I progressed. I started practice my knitting and purling, and as I went on, getting into the summer or early fall, I started practicing lace knitting. And then when I got to early 2013, that is when I first tried cable knitting. And I still have my first cable project. This is the Irish hiking scarf. And actually, it was my professor who taught me to knit who recommended this pattern to me. So it is just a simple, oh, there's a fluff on it. It's a simple cable pattern. I knitted out a Cascade 220. And it was a lot of practice. Like, scarves are great if you just want to practice your stitches. So, and like, I'm surprised I did not make any mistakes in the cables with this. Really surprised. And yeah, I still have and use this project to this day. This is one that I'd have a hard time parting with because it's just, my first cable project. Cables were one of the things that when I would look at people's knitting or, anything, any kind of knitwear, even if it was store-bought, I just really love cables. So that is this one, Irish hiking scarf. My first foray into cables in early 2013. when I started doing up the notes for this video, I was actually surprised at how soon into my life as a knitter that I tackled a sweater. I thought that it took me a lot longer, but apparently it didn't. I tackled a sweater during Malabrigo March of 2013, so just like a year later. It feels like time, like there was a bigger amount of time in between learning to knit and knitting the sweater, but yeah, it was just a year. So here is my first sweater, and unfortunately it did have a little bit of a moth attack during the Great Moth Attack of, I can't remember what year it was, but it was a while ago, and like, it's, you know, moths, it's a constant battle. You have to be ever vigilant, of course, but I haven't had damage since then. But this is the Ease sweater by Alicia Plummer, and I'm trying to decide what to do with it. It was a super, it was a well-written pattern, easy to follow, especially for a beginner. And the yarn is Malabrigo Rios, and I knit it as part of my very first Malabrigo March. And yeah, you can see that this is where the hole is. I don't know if I'm going to repair this or frog the sweater and re-knit it, because where it's like such an old knit, well, it's not that it's an old knit, it's such a first time knit. I feel like I could improve upon this maybe, although it's not too bad. The yarn, as you can see, is really pilly. And there are options for this. I opted to do like the wide neck, but there's an option for a drawstring neck. And looking back, maybe I would have done that now, but I don't know. So still, like, I am not sure what I'm going to do with this, but this is my first sweater. Yay. And yeah, since then I've knit several sweaters. And if you are familiar with my channel, you know that this year is the year of the garment, so I'm knitting like sweaters back to back to back to back. So I'm always going to have a sweater on the needles this year, and probably years after that, because I want to knit all the sweaters. I still have family who don't have sweaters knit by me yet, so I'm going to need to remedy that. So one thing that I would do sometimes with my knitting is that I would knit, like, I'd get like commemorative yarn and do like a nice project with that yarn to commemorate something that happened in my life. And this was in September of 2013. I got my job that I have now, and on my first day of my job, I was still living with my parents in Sydney, and after work on my first day, I went over to Bedeck Yarns and picked up a skein of Tanis Fiber Arts, and I knit this Who hat. And it has little owl cables on it. And this was another big reason why I wanted to knit cables, because I love owls. I mean, oh wait, there's another one though. So yeah. And it's, oh yeah, and there's my candle holder too, has an owl on it. But anyway, and it's fitting because, you know, my job involves wildlife, so this really needs to go in for a soak. It's more than a decade old, so yeah, I've gotten a lot of wear out of it. It needs a little freshening up. I only put the buttons on one of the owl's eyes. So just to give it that little accent thing, and I would always wear it like off center. But yeah, this was a commemorative knit. If I could go back in time, like, I don't know, at the time I didn't really care about roll-up brims, but now I do. I always do long brims that can be folded up. But anyway, yeah, so this was my first day on the job hat. I also really wanted a pair of mittens, and I, you know, fingerless mitts aside, you do need actual mittens in the climate we live in here in Cape Breton. And so my first actual mittens were these ones. They are called Bella's mittens, and they are cabled. And I knit these in the fall of 2013. And you can see I made a mistake here. I just completely forgot the cable, and luckily it was on the first mitt. So when I knit the second mitt, I just made it match. That was the old me. The new me would frog that, like, no question. Over the years, I've become really comfortable with frogging like whole sweaters and stuff just to reknit or knit something different if I'm not completely satisfied with the project. But back then I was like, oh my god, I spent so much time on this, I don't want to frog it. But yeah, so that is what happens there. So this was more cable practice. Of course, you can see I really needed it. And yeah, I also needed mittens. So these are my first mitts, and I still have them, and they are great. I love how long they are. I knit them out of Malabrigo Mecca or Misha. I don't know how it's pronounced. I should at this point. I've been knitting with this yarn for over a decade, so you would think I would know how to pronounce that, but alas, I am me and I still don't. But anyway, first mitts, and now I will talk about my first socks. Now this was like the gateway to something. They're just, yeah, all the socks, knitting all the socks. So the first pattern that I knit socks from is the Ribbed Sock by Kate Etherly. And here's my original first socks. One of them, I saved this specifically for doing this video. The other one is no longer with us because it was like worn out and stuff. And I have so many socks and I enjoy knitting them so much that I don't do repairs, I just do new socks. So this is knit out of Knit Picks Felici, and it was the Hummingbird colorway. You can't get this anymore. So the top is kind of tight. I've learned over the years to kind of cast on a little looser. It is, of course, top down. That's what I knit now, is top down. Heel flap and gusset. Maybe someday I'll do like a sock knitting journey type video, so maybe I should hang on to this for a little longer. But I will tell you that of the first like 11 pairs of socks that I knit, most of them or all of them were either this pattern or the Vanilla Latte socks. So if you're a beginner sock knitter, I highly recommend either one of those patterns. Yeah, basic ribbed sock or Vanilla Latte. So once this occurred, you know, there was a ton of socks that followed after that. It was just, there was no going back. I don't know if you can hear my dog snoring or not, but it's adorable. But I'm going to continue on. I just have a couple more things to talk about, and this is like kind of an honorable mention. It kind of a continuation of practicing knitting eyelets and shawls and stuff, but this is one of my favorite projects of all time. And I told you this K. Breton Highlands colorway would be showing up again, and here it is. This is the Age of Brass and Steam kerchief. This is one of my favorite projects of all time, still over a decade later. I love this thing. Knit out of Handmade and Casbah yarn, and it is just delicious. And I just love wearing it. Like a little bandana around my neck. I'm starting, like I went through a big shawl phase. I have lots of large shawls, and now I'm starting to go back to little scarves and little shawls, and then I'll probably circle back again. Although I never went away from this one. This one is just, I'm just super attached to it. So, and I would like to knit, I'm probably going to knit another Age of Brass and Steam soon. I got yarn set aside for it in a gray colorway from yarn I've had in my stash for way too long. So that is this one. I just really wanted to mention this one as a great beginner friendly pattern. And if you have that special skein of yarn that you purchased at a yarn show while you're on vacation or something like that, then this is a great pattern for a single skein like that. When I was starting out, I kind of thought stuffies would be like a bit fiddly or something like that, you know, like just kind of annoying to knit. I have since changed my tune, but the first ever stuffy that I knit was this one. The pattern is called Dragonflies by Cassidy Clark, and I used leftover Malabrigo Rios to knit this little guy, and I just adored him, and it was like far less fiddly than I thought it would be. And I've since found some really great designers who knit patterns who are patterns that are really intuitive and really, you know, just, so like, I guess Susan Claudino would be an example of that, where you kind of attach the parts as you go, kind of a thing. And there's no real like trying to attach a head onto a body or anything like that, because it just goes. And then there's like, of course, the gnomes, like this fella behind me. You know, these ones are great for beginners if you want to learn how to knit a stuffy. But, you know, so was this one. And it just has a little piece of straw in its abdomen. I guess that would be the part of the dragonfly. But, yeah, super cute. And the other thing about this was funny when I first started knitting and I was looking through little projects and stuff, like easy ones to knit. After having purchased Malabrigo, and then I'd see these little like cup cozies and stuff made out of Malabrigo, and I'd be like, why would they knit a cup cozy out of such beautiful, expensive yarn? And now I know it's just scraps. And you know what else? Like, once something has been in my stash for a while now, I really don't care what I knit out of it. As long, like, I just forgotten about the money that was spent or whatever, and I just knit it. But yeah. The way things change as you like spend years knitting, and you know, things you learn along the way. It's okay to knit a dragonfly out of Malabrigo. So that was in 2015 when I first knit a stuffy. And then I first knit color work. I'm trying to think, I can't remember what year. It was a couple of years after that, I believe. I will put it right here actually. But my first color work project was a hat from my brother, and it's a Doctor Who hat with the TARDIS on it. So I don't know why I haven't knit one of those for myself yet. I really should. But yeah, that was my first color work project. I knitted out of Knit Picks Wool of the Andes, I believe. And ever since then, yeah, it took some tweaking. I had to, you know, get a lot of practice in, but doing a lot better with my color work knitting. I mean, it's definitely not perfect, but I've come a ways from how I've done, you know, back then. So those are all the projects that I wanted to talk to you about. I have some firsts in there. I have some beginner recommendations, just to, you know, the whole story of how I started knitting and how things progressed. And if you found me through this video, hello. It would be great if you would subscribe. I knit a lot of things. I knit all different kinds of things. I knit things for the house. I knit garments. I knit a lot of socks. A lot of socks, yeah. And all the accessories and shawls and stuff. And I am currently working through the saltwater knitting books. You know, the started with saltwater mittens, and then classics, and then gifts, and then socks. So I am knitting my way through those books. And I have adorable animals. And my dog Piper, who is right here. And two cats who are turning 1 on Monday, Ginny and Maisie. They are ginger girls. And I also put in some footage from time to time if I visit like yarn shops, or if I'm just out and about in Cape Breton, I'll, you know, put a little footage at the end of the video if anybody wants to see how beautiful Cape Breton is, because it is beautiful. But anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe. I always forget to say that. And I will see you next weekend with a regular video. Take care.